Alright guys, thank you everyone for being here, especially those for whom it was compulsory. I appreciate it. So I want to talk about getting things done in the modern era, modern tools for modern problems, because it's an era of sort of unprecedented distraction. The amount of things that are hitting your inboxes, the amount of things that are calling for your attention, and the amount of data being generated, some of which might be useful to you, is greater than at any period in history. The first thing that I just want to say is the content of this talk, although I put the talk together myself, is really based primarily on this course called Getting Stuff Done Like a Boss by Tiago Forte, by Forte Labs. And ACQuFRR paid for me to go on this course as part of the agreement that I would give back this information to the rest of the team. So I just want to say thanks to David and to the Institute for letting me do it. We're going to proceed with this talk. First, I'm going to talk about 3 pillars, which is really 3 things that we have to agree upon to get the most out of what I'm going to say. We have to all get onto the same page with those 3 pillars. Then I'm going to present an abstract model for getting things done. And if you get lost when I talk about the abstract model, that's okay, because we're going to move on to the concrete software we're going to use, and we're going to move on to the implementation, and then I'll actually do a live demo of what the system looks like. And if all of it is very overwhelming, that's okay. I'm going to ask for you to take away 2 things from the whole talk. So I'm going to highlight 2 central concepts, and if you forget everything else, just remember those 2 things. And then if I get your buy-in, and you really want to be prepared for part 2, which I think is in 3 weeks, you're going to have homework assignments to do right at the end. Because obviously it's not a university talk without homework assignments. Now, one thing I'm not going to do is I'm not going to talk about PMSing. So I'm not going to talk about procrastination, motivation, or stress. Okay. Talking about those 3 things is very important for productivity and efficiency, but they sort of veer more into the psychological part, whereas I want to talk about the systems part. So let's jump right in with the 3 pillars that I need you to agree on for us just to get started. And the first one is a quote from Tiago: "The mind is a focus tool, not a storage tool." You are very good at focusing on tasks, and you're very bad at remembering things. An analogy is this problem of the self-driving car. So self-driving vehicle technology is incredibly difficult, right? It's incredibly difficult to get right. There are very high stakes. It requires a lot of advanced intelligence being built into machines, a lot of character and optical recognition. But it's worth the resources we're spending on it because humans are so bad at driving. Right, now everyone in this room thinks that they're an above... everyone in this room thinks that they're an above average driver.
Tiago has definitely not been through the Indian education system.
So, people are bad at driving, and by that I mean as a species, what we do is we drive tired, we drive drunk, we drive and talk on our cell phones. Right? So we have these human fallibilities that we recognize, we're bad drivers, and we're willing to invest a lot of resources to overcome those fallibilities. In the same way with memory. You may have an excellent memory, but your memory is just not 100%. And the more you try and achieve, the more spheres of influence you try and have, as you become more of a polymath, the more unreasonable it becomes to rely on your memory. So the first thing that I want to point out here is we want to use our mind for focus and not for storage. We want to move the storage offline into a system that's good at that. The second thing here is only when our daily productivity is automated can we focus on the creative, interesting work. So the buy-in that I want you to have is the best thing for you to do, the biggest contribution you can make, is to do the work that you're uniquely suited to. So either because of your aptitude, because of your talents, or just because of your experience. So as an example here, David is the central node in this very well-connected system of people in mathematical finance. So David is uniquely suited to gathering resources and pointing them in a direction. He's uniquely good at that. I would be much worse suited to doing that. Lemise is uniquely suited for navigating the bureaucracy of UCT. You need something done at UCT, Lemise is uniquely suited to get that done. Now, the best allocation of our resources as an institute and their personal resources is to align themselves with the things that they're best suited to do. Unfortunately, most of the time, those are not the things we get paid for. So all of us have a big bulk of our work that we have to do, that we're relied upon to do, but that we're not uniquely suited to do, right? I also have to deal with UCT bureaucracy. I also have to allocate resources. I have as a note on the slide, perhaps Alex is the exception, because he's getting paid to do interest rate research and he's uniquely suited to do interest rate research. But the things that we're relied upon to do, if we can automate our productivity to get those things done, then we can focus on the creative and interesting work. So that's our goal here. The second buy-in is you have to go, well, I want to spend my mental resources on the creative, interesting stuff, and I want a system, even a system that requires effort and some mental allocation, to handle the boring stuff, the stuff that I can automate. And the last one here is a quote from Chris Howiter, who's one of the original Dirty Dozen, one of the first 12 non-Brazilians to get a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. And he has this quote that I quite like: environment is stronger than will. So if you've ever been on a diet, you know that sticking to your diet while the people around you are eating chocolate and carbs and pastries is much, much harder than sticking to your diet when you're alone at home with only healthy food. And to get chocolate, you have to get in your vehicle, you have to drive somewhere, you have to get out, you have to buy it, you have to drive back. What that means is we want to set up our environment to make it easy for us to do the right thing and hard for us to do the wrong thing. Relying on willpower sets you up for failure. Willpower can get you over little humps, right? But it sets you up for failure in the long term. So what these three things tell us is: one, I don't want to remember anything. Two, I want a system in place, right, that automates the boring stuff. And three, I would like that system to jump out at me and be really easy for me to use. So it's hard for me to do things outside the system, and it's easy for me to do things in the system. Now I'm going to present the abstract model that we're going to use. Keep it in the back of your mind. If you're not good at thinking about abstract models, of course, I'm an applied mathematician, so I like to think in terms of models. Just hold out for 2 slides until we get to the actual software implementation. So this is my abstract model for task management. At the top, we have the whole world. Every series of things that could potentially happen to you and serve as an input into your life. I'm describing the world using a meteor, a bear on a bicycle, and a forest on fire. Because the world can be a scary place and unexpected things happen. Of all the things that happen, some of those things...
Is that why you go to Canada?
Of all the things that can happen, some of those things are going to hit your inboxes. So some of those things are going to interact with you or arrive in your containers. And an inbox here is just an abstract notion of a container. Something that contains items you haven't processed yet. An inbox you might be familiar with is your email inbox. It's an example of an inbox. The whole world of email, some of it hits your inbox. In David's case, all of it hits your inbox. Okay. So some subset of all these inputs arrive at your inboxes. Either we put them there or other people put them there. From there, we push that stuff into our system. We process our inboxes using our system so that nothing gets lost and nothing needs to be remembered. We're going to call the system the para system. And then finally, the system is going to give rise to actions. Okay. Our system is going to tell us what the next best physical action is. So this is our model for task management. Whole world hits our inboxes. Inboxes get processed, things go into our system, and out of our system comes actions, what we should do next. I've already spoken about the definition of an inbox. It's just a container. I also just want to talk about when I describe actions, I'm always going to try and describe them in terms of next physical action. If I tell you to do something, or I've left a reminder for myself to do something, it's very important to try and write that down as the physical, actual thing you should do next. Email David regarding the meeting that we're going to have on the M-Full redesign. That's a very good next physical action. A bad next physical action would be, for instance, the word I use a lot, we used to use a lot, organize bookshelves. Organize is a verb, you can organize things, but if you write down a task as organize bookshelf, that doesn't tell you what to do next, because organize can mean a host of different stuff. A much better next physical action would be something like Google ways of organizing bookshelves. Pick a way of organizing bookshelf. Dewey Decimal. Look up Dewey Decimal System. Those would be good examples of next physical actions. This is our model for the whole world. We're going to jump straight into the system first and talk about how the system works. But the first thing that I want to mention here, even this mental model is useful because I want you to separate when you collect information from when you process information. You don't want to do those two things together because then you'll end up processing things as they come to you and you don't get to choose your priorities. So it's important that we separate out these steps. We have a collection step, we have a processing step, and we have a do step. And we control when things move between the 3 steps. Let's talk about the para system, which is going to be our organizational system. We want a single organizational system across contexts. And what that means is when I use my phone, when I go to my hard drive, when I open up my laptop, when I open up my desktop, when I open up my friend's computer, I always want the same organizational system to be facing me. I want everything to look the same. And the reason for that is so that there's no mental or cognitive burden when I switch between interfaces. So I want my whole life, all of it, to slot into these 4 categories. If you think that categories is a bit abstract at this stage, you can just think about them as folders. So your whole life is going to go into 4 folders. Okay. The first folder is the projects folder. It contains tasks that have a goal and a deadline. If something doesn't have a goal or a deadline, it's not a project. A project is usually more than one next physical action. Right? Those are projects. An area is a role or a sphere of activity with standards to be maintained over time. Now, the number one concept of the two concepts, if you remember nothing else to remember from this talk, is to distinguish in your life between projects and areas. Areas have standards and they don't finish. Projects have goals and deadlines and they finish. A project might be, I need to lose 5 kilograms. That's a project. I want to do it in 6 months. Has a goal, has a deadline. But health and fitness is a standard. It's an area that you want to maintain over a long period of time. So it'll have tasks associated with it. Eat something green every day, right? Run 3 times a week. But those things don't stop. And you can cause yourself a lot of heartache if you don't differentiate between projects and areas. Planning a wedding is a project. Being a husband, it's an area. You can't spend time with your wife once and then call it a marriage. That doesn't work. So if you only remember this distinction, it's a very, very important distinction. Divide your life between projects and areas. The two on the left are actionable, they contain tasks. The two on the right are not actionable. Resources is basically everything you have sitting in your My Documents folder right now, but organized into one place, resources. A resource is anything related to a topic or theme of ongoing interest that could be useful. They don't directly give rise to tasks. But I, for instance, am interested in machine learning. So in my resources folder, I have a machine learning folder. When I see something that interests me, it goes into resources. Archive is inactive things from the other three. Perhaps you lose interest in a topic, so you move it from your resources to your archive. Perhaps you complete a project, so it goes from resources, it goes from projects to archive. Or your areas change. You change jobs, so a role or an area of responsibility you had at your job goes away. You don't delete that, that goes into your archive. Because 3 or 4 years later, maybe you're required to interview someone for a similar role, you can pull up everything related to your previous area of responsibility and go, oh, this is what I needed to be able to do. So, we've covered our abstract model for our system, we've covered what the para system actually is, now we're going to talk about the actual software applications we're going to use to implement this whole thing. So, our system has a step right here at the top here, using our inbox symbol for collect. Step 2 is process. Things move from our inboxes across into projects, areas, resources, and archives. And then finally, the system gives rise to actionable things to do. I'm going to recommend applications, but of course you can use any application that has a similar capability. What is important for your applications is that they're cross-platform. If you use an Apple iPhone, right, and you use a Linux machine, whatever application you use has to be able to be used on the Linux machine and on the iPhone. I actually recommend only applications that have a web interface that I can go to in the browser. And the reason for that is every modern device has a browser, so if I'm stuck working on someone else's computer because mine caught fire, I can go into the browser and I can get to my applications. Our entire productivity system is going to be captured in 4 applications. A to-do list, a place to manage my reference and notes, some hard drive storage, some hard storage, for which we're going to use cloud storage, so that if a meteor hits your computer, you don't lose your data, and some email system. Those 4 applications have to be set up for us to use our task management tools.
What if the meteor hits the data columns?
Then you have bigger problems than losing your data, which is why we only have redundancies up to a point, right? I want to talk about these support applications. I recommend that you have a cloud calendar that syncs across all your devices. I recommend that you use something for checklists. I'll show you what I use checklists for. A very easy thing. I use Microsoft Sticky Notes on my desktop. Really easy. And then these are honorable mentions. I'm not going to talk about them again during the talk. But I just want to say here, if it's 2019 and you're remembering passwords, you're living life wrong, really. Get a decent password manager, install it on all your devices, get one very large, complicated password that only you remember, and then get your password manager to generate 64-bit encrypted random strings for you. Like, just don't do that anymore. My amount of stress and my life quality improved dramatically when I switched to using a password manager. Highly recommend you do that. The number one security threat in modern life is people reusing passwords. And they do that because they have too many to remember. So don't do that. And I also recommend you use an ad blocker. I use uBlock Origin. These are just quality of life applications, and maybe at some point in the future, we'll have a whole seminar where we talk about how to use the internet safely.
Is anything wrong with Google Chrome's password manager?
No, nothing at all. The only thing that bothers me, then you just have to use Google Chrome for all your interfaces, right? What I don't like about that is if I'm on my phone and I have to log into an F&B app and I want to know the password, LastPass is installed on my phone, so it can fill that in for me, things that lie outside the browser. Right? So these are the 4 pieces of software that I'm going to recommend here. I'm going to use Todoist for my to-do list, Evernote for my reference and notes, Google Drive for my cloud storage, and Gmail for my email account. And these apps will speak to each other in a very easy way, but you can swap them all out. Mac has a built-in to-do app, if I remember correctly. Microsoft has Microsoft OneNote as well. You can also use Google Keep. Google Drive, you can use Dropbox, you can use Box, you can use Mega, and Gmail, of course, you can use Outlook if you like. All these apps have integrations to all those others. All of these apps are going to reside in the Para system. So before we get too deep into the detail, just want to show you what that looks like. If we open up my Todoist, which we're going to do when I do a live demo, in my Todoist I have an inbox, right? I have projects, I have areas, I have an archive, so that's the Para system right there. And then I have this one little extra folder called Someday Maybe, that we'll talk about. In my Evernote, I have an inbox, I have projects, I have areas, I have resources, I have archive. Para system right there. In my Google Drive, I have inbox, projects, areas, resources, archive. Keep in mind that these are all the documents in my computer are stored in one of those 4 folders. Nothing exists outside this system. And then lastly, Gmail is a special one. I don't have any folders in Gmail. Gmail is just an inbox. That's all it does. It captures things for you. We're going to talk about Gmail at the end. I'm only going to concentrate on 2 applications in this talk. I'm going to concentrate on Todoist, and at the end I'll talk a little bit about Gmail because everyone wants to know how to process email. But really, Evernote and Google Drive are more to, well, how do we manage things that are not actionable? Things that don't give rise to tasks. And we're going to talk about that a bit in part 2 when we start touching on knowledge management. Talk about knowledge management at the end. But for now, I want you to think about, I have some to-do list. Okay, I have a to-do list. How do I manage that to-do list? Excuse me. And this is how we're now going to go talk to each of the 3 steps. Collect, process, and do. But first, if you're going to remember only 2 things. First thing to remember is the distinction between projects and areas. If you're going to remember one more thing, last thing I'm going to ask you to remember, if you never look at these slides again, you walk out of this talk, you don't implement anything, is no open loops. And what that means is, if anything occurs in your consciousness that could potentially be done, put it in an inbox immediately. Don't wait. As soon as something pops into your head, any task, any open loop, put it in your inbox immediately. If you just do that, if you stop relying on your memory to keep track of your obligations or your commitments, and you start relying on an application, it can be a notebook, to keep track of your obligations, your commitments, and your tasks, your productivity and efficiency will go up. If you do nothing else, even if you only occasionally glance at that notebook, because the act of writing it down is also going to firm it up in your memory. I don't recommend you rely on that memory, but if this is all I can get you to do, something occurs to you, you write it down. A lot of anxiety and stress is caused by trying to juggle things in your mind. Get them out of your mind onto a piece of paper, but I recommend you get them into your Todoist inbox. An open loop is actually slightly more general than just a potential task. It actually includes anything you want to remember or refer to later. So right now I'm talking about an open loop as something you might want to do, goes into your Todoist inbox. But later on, if you something you want to remember or a note you want to make, it's going to go into one of your other inboxes immediately. So this is the capture step. Any potential task you may want to complete, anything you can think of, goes into your Todoist inbox immediately. You enter it there. And I'm going to show you guys how to do that. There are 3 rules for capturing open loops. Every open loop must be captured in an inbox. We're just focusing on the Todoist inbox here, but later on, if you've got other types of loops, we'll go into an inbox. If there are any leaks, you can't trust the system. And this is really the hardest part about task management, getting everything into an inbox. Because if you put some things in an inbox and you try and remember other things, eventually you just won't trust your inbox. You won't refer to it as your source for tasks because it doesn't contain everything you need to do. So your inbox has to contain everything you need to do. Have as few inboxes as possible. We've already sort of taken care of that by only having 4. In the knowledge management seminar, I'll talk a little bit about how we can probably drop the inbox that's sitting in Google Drive. I'll talk about that. So you could maybe only have 3, we have 4, which is fine. And then the last one, you're gonna have to go to the process step, collect, everything goes into inbox, go from inbox to the system at least once a day. So all your inboxes need to be cleared once a day. Most of you will probably, if you get a lot of email, have to do this twice a day. Right? I only clear my inboxes once a day. Anything that arrives in my inbox gets then cleared the next day. Because the rest of my day is spent doing the things that I think are important. Right? My inboxes don't dictate what I do. They just dictate what hits my inbox, what gets processed. So these are the 3 rules for capturing open loops. The next slide is going to look complicated. Right? So now we're going to move to step 2, which is processing open loops. At the end of this step, my Todoist inbox has a ton of stuff in it. A whole bunch of tasks. Now I want to take those tasks and push them into my system. My system is Power. Projects, areas, resources, and archives. That's step 2. From the inbox into the system. I'm going to talk about it at the left here. So imagine in Todoist, I have a list of tasks. For each task in that list, I'm going to answer. I'm going to use this flowchart and go from top to bottom. The first question is this thing that I have written down actionable? Does it relate to an action? In Todoist, I'm only recording my actions, so the answer is going to be yes. But if this was a different kind of inbox, which we'll talk about later, maybe your Gmail inbox, the answer could be no. And then we go somewhere else. If the answer is yes, does this thing take less than 2 minutes to do? Sometimes I have things in my inbox that go, WhatsApp Liesel about picking up groceries. It takes less than 2 minutes for me to type that message. If this thing takes less than 2 minutes to do, just do it. If it takes more than 2 minutes to do, put it in its appropriate place. Its project, its area, or if it's something you're thinking about maybe doing someday, I put it in the someday maybe folder. Projects that I'm interested in. I'll show you guys my someday maybe folder. It's pretty chaotic. Once I've done this, I ask myself, should I do it as soon as possible? If I should do it as soon as possible, it gets tagged next. And I'll show you how the next tag works. If I don't have to do it as soon as possible, I give it some time frame. Thursday, Friday, next week. Any time frame like that I'll do, and Todoist will sort that for you. I'll show you guys how that works nicely. And then once I finish this step for each item in my inbox, now my inbox is empty. It's done, my inbox is processed. But I have a whole list of tasks that I've tagged next. Do as soon as possible. I pull up everything tagged next, and I pick the ones I'm going to do today. And I tag them today. So everything goes out of my inbox, disappears into the correct place. Then I say, show me everything that I've said I need to do as soon as possible, next. And then I tag the ones that I need to do today. Then those sit in my Todoist, which you saw a little bit earlier over here. My Todoist has a thing called today. From those, I'm going to pick the tasks that I want to do today. Don't remember this. Okay, we're going to use a checklist to help us do this. Don't try and remember these steps. We're going to use a checklist. I just want to talk about the 3 rules for processing an inbox. The first one is, we go from top to bottom. This is hard to do because your inbox is full of stuff of different priorities, but you haven't decided priorities yet. Don't decide them now. Just process top to bottom. Get everything out of your inbox. Don't jump around. Process each item one at a time, no leaving anything for later. When you say, I'm going to process my inbox now, when you're done, your inbox must be empty. Don't leave things floating around in your inbox. And never put anything back in the inbox. Okay. And what you'll see later is if we have different inboxes, things from my Gmail inbox might go to my Todoist inbox. It can't go back. Okay, it can only go one way. So we'll talk about that when we get to multiple inboxes. And then finally, the last step. Now we have a list of tasks that we've identified we could do today. These are the things I could do today that I think are important. Now before we do them, we pick 3 of them. If you've picked a host of lists of tasks for today, you might think you can do them all. And maybe you can. But that's assuming nothing goes wrong. No one gives you more tasks, nothing more urgent comes up. The Google data center doesn't catch fire. Pick 3 things that if you just did those things unambitiously, things that you could do easily, maybe by lunchtime. If you just did those things, you'd have a pretty good day. Pick those 3 things and move them to the top of your list. Once you're done with that, start doing your tasks. Okay, that's our entire task management system. We're going to open up today. We're going to tag which of today's 3 tasks would have the biggest impact, move them to the top of the list, or tag them as top priority, start your day. I really like this quote, if you have more than 3 priorities, you don't have any. Okay, Pick 3 things that you want to get done. Now, those 3 things might be baby steps on bigger projects, but you've decided that those projects are important to you today. On the right-hand side here, I just want to show that at the top, when we talk about open loops, in this whole chaotic world, I've put the Google Calendar there, because your calendar is a source of loops. Your calendar might say in 3 days there's a birthday. Last week you missed this meeting, don't forget to get the notes. Your calendar has information in it that you've got to process. And these checklists, the one on the previous slide, don't remember them. That's what I use sticky notes for. Okay, I have a note on my desktop that says, process your inbox like this. We're going to walk through that note all together. I'm going to show you guys how that looks. And I think now is the time for it. Okay. So we're just going to consider Todoist. Okay. First thing I'm going to show you over here, I'm not going to show you that. First thing I want to show you over here is I click on my Microsoft Sticky Notes. And I've got an example 1, which is for you guys here, which is just about processing the Todoist inbox. Now, when I arrive at work in the morning, I want to do my daily checklist, and I do each of these things one after the other. And this is just a text recording of that graph that I just showed you. So the first thing that I do is I empty my mind of open loops. Anything that I could potentially want to get done. I have already thought of some examples to put in my inbox over here. For you guys, can you think of anything else that you want to get done? If you want to give an example? No one has anything on the to-do list? That's why I made 5 examples in case there's no audience participation. So I've emptied my mind of open loops. My second step here is just check your calendar. Look backwards and forwards in case there's a loop hanging around. Just 2 days. Quickly look in your calendar. I've done that, and that's where I got pick up laundry to go in this list. Now I'm going to clear my Todoist inbox. The way this works, process each new loop, starting at the top, 1 in time. Am I going to consider doing it sometime in the future? If so, make it someday. If it takes less than 2 minutes, do it now. Otherwise, make sure it's written as a physical action, not the verb organize, right? Tag it with the project or area, and assign a due date or next, if I have to do it as soon as possible. So let's take a look at that. Get haircut is not a next physical action, right? A next physical action would be something like phone Warren to book haircut. Now, let's say I want to do this as soon as possible. I clearly had this on my list last week Friday. So I had to do it as soon as possible, so it gets tagged next. You can click here, give it the label next, which is one of the labels that I have, or you can use the shortcut at, it's next. That's how I've tagged it next. Now I have to assign it to a project or an area. You will have your own projects and areas. One of my areas is life admin. Things that I have to do to keep living. So this goes to hashtag life admin. You can also drag the task and put it there. I like to use the little hashtag life admin. And now the thing to pay attention to is when I click save, this disappears from my inbox. That item's being processed. Collect feedback on getting things done seminar. Then I should probably do that as soon as possible as well. Next. And I have a project on this seminar. Seminar is a project for me. It has a deadline. Finishes today. It's over here under all my projects. I could drag it and put it there, but instead I'm just going to tag it as seminar, getting things done. And then when I save, it disappears. Pick up laundry. Whoa, doesn't take less than 2 minutes. Normally what I would do now is I would rewrite this as WhatsApp Liesel to pick up laundry, and then I would do it immediately. So that would disappear. I would get that one because it would take less than 2 minutes for me to do. So cancel, click. I don't mark it, I actually can't mark this when it's done, just to show you guys it just disappears. When is the new season of Final Space coming to Netflix? Now it's not really a task, right? It's just something that occurred to me, and I immediately dumped into my inbox because I don't want to remember anything. And now in the morning, even though I'm at work, because it takes less than 2 minutes, I go, Final Space Season 2 release date. I actually Googled it before the presentation. And it turns out that Final Space has actually already been released in June, but it's not on Netflix yet, and the date is indeterminate. Now that I know that, I go back and I tick the system. Okay, inbox processed. Inbox is empty. I go back to my checklist, review Todoist next, and tag the tasks that I'm going to do today. Now this is going to be a little bit scary for you because I have next tasks in all of my projects, right? You might have, so I have already set up many next tasks. But now I say, show me everything marked next. This is everything that I could potentially do today. Okay? Everything that I could potentially do today, including in my personal life. So you can see here, I work through the mathematics of the current draft of the USP
What was the
paper.
last line item? I don't
remember.
Yes,
Identify the times during the week when I can effortlessly listen to podcasts. So these are all things that I want to do. This goes in understanding the world, which is an area for me. But I'm going to go to the examples here, where we've got example phone warrant book haircut. Let's tag that as today. You can hit schedule over here, or you can write the word today. Just TOD. Let's go sort notes into Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and submission grappling. Let's tag that as today, something to do today. Collect feedback on getting things done seminar. Tag that as today. Anything else I want to add? Nope, done with that. When that's done, tag my top 3 priorities by going to today. And of course, I only have 3 things for this example. Now, you can drag these things around to give you an order. Or what I like to do is I actually like to use Todoist's priority system. It's got this priority system, and P1 is the highest. So I just pick the ones with the highest. I just tag the top 3, and I make them priorities. Now I start my workday. I have decided which things are going to get done today based on my system of priorities, not based on what things hit my inboxes. Okay. Keep in mind that your email inbox is someone else's to-do list. Someone else is asking you to do things. It's something that they want to tick off, but you got to take control of that. That is my live demo of how to use Todoist. Very easy if you're only tracking things to do, but of course all of us have more than one inbox. So before we leave here today, I want to show you how email slots into this system, the Todoist system. Back to our talk. Right. Now, what if we have multiple inboxes? So right now I've concentrated on my case, I have one inbox. Anything that could potentially happen went to my Todoist inbox. If I have multiple inboxes, I just arrange them in a hierarchy. So I say I'm going to process this inbox first, then this inbox, then this inbox. Once all my inboxes are processed, I go to the next step, which is going through my tasks and tagging them, like I just did. So the previous diagram that I had, is it actionable, gets one layer added on top of it, which is my additional inbox. Now sits above that, is it actionable? So you can see here, I now have an additional inbox, the Gmail inbox, right? Now here we can go, well, are things actionable, yes or no? Get an email. Does this email require me to do something? If yes, send the email to Todoist. And I'm going to show you how to do that. But what that means is I click the email and I say, go to Todoist, because Todoist is integrated with both Gmail and with Outlook. And that email will appear in my Todoist inbox. It's moved to my actionable inbox. I can then archive the email. It's gone. But in Todoist, if I click that email, I get right back to it. So I can tag emails as actionable, which moves them from my Gmail inbox, which is a general container, to my actionable inbox inside Todoist. Also, if something's not actionable, I have an email that I'd like to read at some later date. Don't leave that in your inbox, in your Gmail inbox. Then it fills up with stuff that you want to read. Instead, I'm going to send that to my reference and notes. I'm going to send that to Evernote. I'll show you guys how to do that. So again, that moves from my email inbox into my references. And then later, when I have time, I go to my references and I read. And then the rest of this chart is exactly the same as we saw before. Once things are in my Todoist inbox, I can start processing my Todoist inbox the same way that I have. Does it take less than 2 minutes? Yes. Do it now. Does it take more than 2 minutes? Okay. Tag project area or someday. Tag project area or someday. Should I do it as soon as possible? Tag next and tag time frame. I said this going to Tom and he does not like it. Having 1,000 unread emails in your inbox is not a sign that you get too many emails. It's a sign that you have bad downstream systems. You have no way of managing that stuff coming in. Okay? What you want is a way of managing it. You may still only reply to 1 out of 3 emails, but you're now doing that by choice instead of by necessity, which is a very big difference in the experience of your life. So if you have multiple inboxes, you're just going to have an inbox hierarchy. I always start with my email inbox, and then you're going to push all those items to another inbox, either Evernote or Google Drive, things I want to store, or to Todoist, things I want to do. Then I'm going to process my non-actionable inboxes, which for me is Notes and Google Drive. I'm not going to take you through processing the non-actionable inboxes in detail. I'll show you very briefly what it looks like. And then the last thing I do is process my Todoist inbox, because that's going to tell me the tasks for today. So potential tasks have not just come from the outside world, they've also come from my calendar, they've come from my Gmail inbox, they've come from my cloud storage, and they've come from my notes manager. Those are all the places tasks could come from. I'll say something, do I want to demonstrate this now? Yes, I want to demonstrate this processing of the emails now. Okay, so I logged onto, I don't know why I'm not getting internet here, let's give it a shot. File space, is it G24? Yeah. We're not going to worry about those two for now. I'll process these emails tomorrow morning. What I want to do is show you these two emails that I set up as an example here, which is Liesel Swartz sent me these two emails. One of them contains important information, something that I might want to reference later, and one of them contains things that I actually need to do. So what I want to do with these emails, what I don't want to do is keep them in my inbox. So this one that contains important information, well, Evernote, which is my note management system, fire it up for you over here, which we're going to talk about when we talk about knowledge management, which comes a little bit later, but not in this seminar, comes a little bit later. Evernote itself has an inbox, and this inbox has an email address. And what I do in my contacts is I make an email contact called reference. And if I get an email that I want to read at a later date, I go, well, forward this guy, send it to reference, which is my Evernote inbox, and I send it off to my non-actionable inbox. Now I can archive this email reasonably shortly. I'll see if it arrives in this inbox a little bit later. I don't know how long the email takes to get you. Yeah, give it a sec. Here I have an email that contains a list of actionable stuff, things that I need to do. Do this, do that. The email about the meeting minutes from Monday, for instance. Those require actionable triggers for me. So I take this email and I use my Todoist integration. It integrates with Gmail and with Outlook. I say add to Todoist. It says to me, it takes the subject line of the email and it marks it with a date. I always say no date because I wanted to go into my inbox. And I say extract actions from Liesel's email. And I add this task. Now I can archive this email. It's gone away. If I didn't have this appointment, which I'll process tomorrow, my inbox would be empty. And inside Todoist, inside my inbox over here, I've got this extract actions from Liesel's email. And if I go here and I click on it, even though that email's been archived, it'll take me directly to the email. So when I am ready to do that task, it's in my physical, actionable application, then I can go back to the email and do the task. But I don't process my emails, I don't complete the actions prompted by my emails as I get them. So that is the email and Evernote integration for my Gmail inbox. I really want the thing to appear here so that I can show you guys that it does indeed do that. But because of where we're situated, the email has to go to, aha! Forward, this email contains important information. So now this reference email has arrived in my Notes Manager inbox, where I organize my knowledge, not my actionable tasks. And now my Gmail inbox is empty. It's been processed. What happens in my checklist, example 2, daily checklist, if you have multiple inboxes, is it looks exactly the same as what I did before. I empty my mind of open loops, I collect my calendar for more open loops, but now I clear my Gmail inbox before I clear my Todoist inbox. The additional inbox just appears in front of me. I just want to contrast this now with my actual daily checklist. So at the bottom here, it's a little bit bigger because I've got an Evernote inbox as well, and I also have a desktop and Google Drive inbox that I processed early on before I push things out. But every day I start my day, I fire up my checklist, I work my way through my checklist. When I'm done with my checklist, I have a series of tasks in today for Todoist. And from those I prioritize and start my day. This way nothing goes missing. The last slide before I give you all homework, right, which I know you can't wait for. Talk about multiple inboxes. I want to briefly just talk about the non-actionable inboxes. You have something sitting in Evernote, like I now do, or you have something sitting in your Google Drive inbox. To process those inboxes, sometimes you'll think something wasn't actionable. I saved this web page, or I collected this paper. And then when you go process it, you're like, wait, I actually want to implement this. Then just send it to Todoist. What happens next? But if it's really not actionable, then you put it in the correct place. In your project folder, the corresponding project folder in Google Drive, or the corresponding project notebook in Evernote. Project or area, folder or notebook. I want to say something about these. Evernote and Todoist have amazing integration with Chrome browser, with Firefox browser, and the Internet Explorer browser, I very often come across a web page that I either want to read later, or it's relevant to a project that I'm working on. Right? What Evernote allows me to do is I can just click on the web page and go send to Evernote, and it will clip the whole web page and dump it in Evernote. And then I can put that in the correct project or area folder. And later for my projects, I have a collection of all the resources that doesn't even require me to be online. I can just go look at those files as I need them. I can show this to you guys very briefly. I can also take web pages to Todoist directly, in the same way that I do with emails. I can right click and say send to Todoist. It asks me what should this task be called and should it have a due date. And I have it end up in my inbox. Anytime I get any new file, it either belongs in a project I already have, or maybe I have to open up a new project for it. It belongs in an area that I've already defined, or it belongs in a resource. So everything on my computer goes in one of those 4 folders. Don't create random notes to remember things. If you're having a meeting and you're keeping the minutes of a meeting, right? Well, most likely you have a project or area that relates to that meeting or your role in the organization. In Evernote, go there and make your note there, so that you have a host of notes related to that role. This was the meeting notes from then. Oh, here were all the other meeting notes as well, in my role as senior lecturer at UCT. And then lastly, it's now been about 6 months or 7 months, of which I've gotten the system up and running, started working with the system on a daily basis. I have not yet found something that lies outside the system, that can't be processed by using these steps. I very briefly just want to illustrate to you guys what I think is really, really cool. If I go here and I go Math Intersect Programming, which is a very, very nice blog by Jeremy Kuhn. And at some point, let's go to Neural Networks and Backpropagation. At some point I'd really like to read this. It just seems like something that I'd really like to read. I can click on my little Evernote icon over here. And it's going to say, would you like to save this article into your inbox? I can say yes, please. And then later on, when I process that inbox, then I can move it to the machine learning area. And when I'm working on machine learning, I can go read this article on my inbox, no matter where I am. Whether I'm on my phone, whether I'm on my friend's computer, Evernote has a browser integration. I can log into Evernote there and read the article there. So that instead of browsing the web for new random stuff to read, I can go read the stuff that I said I would read. And if I read this thing and I see, you know what I really want to do is I want to implement backpropagation. Well, okay, cool, then I'm going to click on it, and I'm going to say add to Todoist. And I should get some sort of confirmation dialog. Or not. Ah, there it is already. Neural networks and backpropagation algorithm, math and programming. So it's a task in my inbox that links to the web page. Now, how do you get started doing all of this? So I've shown you what the system looks like when you set it all up. But when I did the course, I did this entire setup over the course of about 2 or 3 weeks, slowly but surely, working my life into this format. So I've identified 6 steps for you to do, but some of these steps are more effort than others. This is how I would go about taking, not assuming that your organizational system is chaos right now, but taking whatever you currently have and moving it into this framework. So install Todoist, or whatever to-do app you want. Install your node manager, whether you want to use OneNote or Google Keep. Install Evernote. Install your cloud storage, whether you want to use Google Drive, Microsoft, what's it called? Microsoft OneDrive. Then start this system. So the first step is writing down everything you could ever potentially want to do in your Todoist inbox. If you one day want to raise a Rottweiler, you write it in your Todoist inbox. Later on, you're going to tag it as someday baby. That's fine. But you don't want these dreams to sit in the back. You want to write a fiction novel, you write that in your Todoist inbox. It's going to get tagged, you write down everything. This is going to lead, I said here, this list will be quite large. I think mine had 400 items in it. Just think. And look around you for things that you should do. If you're sitting at your house, look around your house, things are going to jump out at you that you probably should do. I should probably replace the laundry basket. I should probably have a system for organizing this cupboard where we always fight about. Step 2, make a list of all your ongoing projects. These are all your obligations, things that have a deadline and have a goal, right? Create a folder for each of these projects in Todoist. Like you guys saw my folder underneath, I had a folder. Step 3, make a list of all your areas of responsibility. This can be a little bit tough, but as you make these lists, over time you'll see that you change them and add things. Something that you thought was a project is actually an area of responsibility. Something that you thought was an area of responsibility is actually a project that has a deadline and it finishes. So, for instance, a place where I made the mistake is I thought that, well, the M-Phil dissertations, it's an area of responsibility. I have a responsibility to them, I have to maintain my communication with them, but it's actually not. Because on the 20th of December, they all hand in. That's done. So it's a goal, it's a deadline, it's a project that can be finished out of the project. Yeah, if I'm lucky. It's my desired outcome. Step 4, you've got this list of projects, you've got this list of areas, all inside Todoist, and you have this enormous inbox, 400 items in it. Process your Todoist inbox. So now everything is going to be moved into the project or area with the hashtag, right? Tag some of the things as next, things that you actually want to do next. Most of it's probably going to end up in someday maybe. I would like to implement my own Git in Python. It's a very cool tutorial. But that's in my someday maybe folder. We just don't have time for that stuff right now. Or some of these things you will schedule. And when I say schedule, you just tag them with a day. What's nice about that is on that day, when I get to the today part of my processing, Todoist will throw that stuff up. I don't have to think about them again. I don't have to look them up. I've said they're going to come up on that day. So they're going to bubble up when I need to see them. Step 5. We finished with Todoist. Now we move to installing Evernote and we create our notebook stacks. And these stacks are going to reflect what you already have in Todoist. Right? You're going to have a project set of notebooks with all your projects that are in Todoist. You're going to have an area set of notebooks with all your areas that are in Todoist. And then the very last thing here is create a daily checklist that sits on your desktop. Somewhere easy for you to get to, just to click on your desktop. And for 1 week, do the items on that checklist first thing in the morning. Processing steps now that I've shown you how to take everything from the whole wide world into your inboxes, from your inboxes into your system, and from your system how to identify your next physical actions, the best things that you can do next. Try it for a week. It's not easy to get started, right? And that brings me to the very last slide. This quote by Robin Sharma that I quite like. All change is hard at first, messy in the middle, and gorgeous at the end. There's a period where you're trying to do this, where it's just sort of a mess, because you're keeping some things on track over there, and you're keeping some things over there, and it's not quite sorted out. Just power through. That's the best advice I can give you. When you get to the place, at the end, where everything is more or less in the system, it becomes really easy to do, and you actually want to do your daily checklist. Because once you've done your daily checklist, you just go, everything that could potentially I have to do, I've sorted it. I'm not missing any obligations, I'm not missing any meetings. They're all appeared in the correct place where they need to appear. And when I need to be reminded of them, I'll be reminded of them. The perfect is the enemy of the good. Okay, you're not going to get this right perfectly, just get started. Even now, when I was preparing this presentation, I wanted to show you guys what my project's areas and folders look like. And I realized, well, some of these are out of place. Actually, this project's done, I can archive it. And that's what we're going to talk about in the second part of this presentation, sorry, the second part of the seminar series. I want to talk about knowledge management, but I'm also going to talk about reviews, right, and timescales. So we have a daily checklist, and we're also going to have one that we do every week, where we decide on our priorities for the week. And then we're going to have a bigger one every month. Did I succeed at things this past month, or things moving forward? And then finally, you'll have a yearly checklist, where you ask yourself, did I do what I wanted to do this last year? And if I could do anything in the next year, what would I do? And all of those higher scale checklists are going to fit very neatly into the system. Thank you.
Two weeks, Ralph, not 3.
Yeah.
We're going to break next week, and then we'll see Ralph again.
What break?
Just look at your calendar, brother.
Sorry, we have a question.
Teaching 3 days a week. Sorry, we've got another meeting. So not being rude, but that's why we had your seminar.
That was a pleasure, guys. I'll make the slides and everything available.
Please email them to everyone.
We'll do
Thanks, Ralph.
You can let the hubbub die down, and then I'll answer some questions.
I don't like Robin Sharma. I read
That is actually,
Marco's always for
I'm surprised you to know that that was not a question. Alex, do you have a question?
Yes, I do. So you said clear your inboxes daily. Specifically, first thing in the day. Do you take a stance on that? Yeah,
I do, yeah.
And then you had your today to-do list.
Yeah.
Do you?
So that's not an inbox, right? One
Yes.
thing that we tagged as today, those are not things that I potentially want to do today.
Yes, but do you take a stance on when you need to do those? And I just, so you led with saying that there's certain things you have to do, and you have to do them so you can do the things you want to do or should be doing. So do you, just on that, those tasks, should they be done first? Because that's like a genuine dilemma for me, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So now let's say we've gotten to the end of processing our inboxes, and now we're tagging a bunch of stuff that's marked next. We're looking at a bunch of stuff that marks next. When you mark things next, some of those things you mark them next because people are relying on you to do them.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
You know you need to do that today to get your job done.
Yeah.
You mark them as next. Then you went through them and marked, of the things marked next, what can I feasibly do today? Now you're looking at your list of stuff to do today. Some of that stuff is just stuff other people want you to do, that you should do. But now they're here in front of you, and you can prioritize. And it might be that your priority is, well, I'm going to get that boring automated stuff out of the way right now, so I'm going to make those 3 my top priority. Once that's done, I know what people are relying on me to do today is done. And I can focus on these 3 very creative or interesting problems. But instead of having what people are relying on you to do, filtered somewhere or hidden between the things that you want to do.
Sure.
You have all of them up front, and then you can prioritize. That's cool right there. Does that make sense?
Yep. And then one second question.
Yeah.
So then the first step of just clearing the inbox, how long does that take you on average?
Yeah, it completely depends on what's in my inbox. Somewhere between a good fast inbox clearing day for me, right? Where I end up with, so going all the way from sitting at my computer to having my tasks for today. On a good day, that's 20 minutes, right? On a hard, slow day, that's 1 hour. I sit down, and when I get out the other end, these are the things I'm going to do today. But so far in my experience, however long that takes has been worth the investment, because I don't get lost in throughout my day. What also sometimes happens is it turns out that you can just do all this stuff much quicker than you thought you did. Right? Usually the opposite happens, but sometimes I said I'm going to do these 6 things, and then I finish them by 11:30, and now I owe this institute a lot more stuff, and I have to go back and look for things to do. But that's where you want to be, right? Your obligations are fulfilled.
So you felt that your efficiency almost doubled in terms of time management?
This is such a good question. So time management, which is really, well, I have all these tasks, how do I do them in an effective way, right? That's sort of the next layer that we can discuss. Now that you've decided what you want to do, how do you do them in a way that gets them done on time, for instance? This system is really just about choosing those things. So I don't talk about, well, how many hours should you allocate to this, or how many hours should you allocate to that? When do you stop working on them? That's the next level. The very first level is just going, well, what should I be doing? Let's identify that stuff first. Then I find time sort of manages itself because you know what your responsibilities are. Most people don't even know that. What am I responsible for doing? What should I be getting done today? But we can have, and this book, right at the top here that I cite here, this Getting Results the Agile Way, I'll talk about it a little bit in the second part of the seminar. That's really about, cool, once you've identified your responsibilities, how do I do them as well as I can?
How do you integrate this into a team?
That is a very good question that we'll have to take offline. But what I can say about that just off the bat is that Todoist projects and areas can be shared amongst multiple people. So in my life admin area, I can assign tasks to Liesel, she can assign tasks to me. But this is really good. My stance for this presentation is personal task management. How do you manage yourself? But she and I share a Todoist. So constantly she pushes things to me and I push things to her. And the accountability can be good or bad for your relationship. I'm just saying.
Evernote allows you to do that as well.
Yeah, I share notebooks in Evernote. And as an example of one of the notebooks that we have shared in Evernote is we're moving, so we have this project called Our New Home. That's shared, and in it has a list of things that we're keeping or things that we're giving away. All of that's in there so we can both see it and work on it as we go.
Thank you, Rob.
Thank you very much, guys.
Thank you.